Get started momentarily.
Sure. Hey, David. Really nice to meet you. Perfect timing. We just had a 5-hour public hearing last night.
You know you're only talking to the mic, right? It's not actually right.
You know what? You are just on a roll early this morning.
I just got some coffee.
Everything good?
Everything's good. How are you this morning? Awesome. I had to stay in and do a little work this morning.
Go a little bit over there. I got the table leg chair. Thanksgiving dinner. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. I am John Cranley. I'm mayor of Cincinnati, and I chair the conference's task force of mayors and police chiefs, joined by Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, and our committees work hand in hand. I want to start by putting something on the calendar that Wade, the mayor of Toledo next to me, will be talking more about later. But on April 11th, this task force will be gathering in Toledo, Ohio, exclusively on the issue of guns. Specifically, an idea that Wade came up with recently and has been written about in the Huffington Post is the idea of whether or not we could provide scorecards to gun manufacturers as we procure guns for our police departments, and how we would devise that scorecard, and whether we could get buy-in from mayors across the country using the consumer power to improve corporate responsibility. I think it's a fascinating idea, and I think we should work on it. Between now and then, the Brady Campaign, a coalition to end gun violence, in every town will be helping to put together a day's worth of panels, and we very much hope that you can all attend, and you will all be invited. As we all know far too well, gun violence continues to be the most serious problem in cities. Most of the legislative progress has been stymied by the NRA, not just at the federal level, but in a state like Ohio, the state legislature has blocked us from being able to do anything at the local level. But it's the local level where we had a multiple shooting in 2018 that we deal with the tragedy, we deal with the pain and the suffering, and our hands are often tied on being able to do anything about it. In this session, we'll hear from two mayors who are undertaking legislative action in their cities to reduce gun violence, one of whom dealt ably and led this country with the aftermath of the horrific mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in his city. And our heart went out to him, and he stood up for his city and for those lives lost. We'll hear from one of the nation's most respected police chiefs, my co-chair, Chuck Ramsey, who is now an advisor to the Conference of Mayors and to all of us, meaning he's available to you. We'll hear from a survivor of the Marjory Stone Douglas High School shootings who has become an advocate for gun control policies and legislation. And we'll have a briefing on the glimmer of hope in Congress. The background check bill may get some movement this year. But let me turn it over to my good friend, Gary Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, who chairs the conference's Criminal and Social Justice Committee and is a true leader on these issues.
Thank you, Mayor Cranley, and thank you for your leadership. We are so grateful for all that you've done and all that mayors around the table have done, and non-mayors, quite frankly. We appreciate everyone being here today, and whether we talk about the mass shootings that we've come way too familiar with, or whether we talk about the mass killing that happens one person at a time, we know that gun violence plagues our communities in a way that not only hampers our productivity and the development that we work so hard towards, but it devalues human life in a way that none of us believe is acceptable or okay. And so today, we're going to talk about that. For more than 50 years, the Conference of Mayors has had a strong policy relative to gun violence, gun safety, and what we must do as mayors to address that type of behavior and activity. And some of it is legislative, some of it is policy making, some of it happens at the national or federal level, some of it occurs at the state level. But there are many things that we can do in our cities, and today we will hear about that. Before we get started with our speakers, I'd like to go around the room, and I'll start with Mayor Peduto and ask each mayor to introduce themselves and the city that they represent.
Hi, I'm Bill Peduto. I'm the mayor of Pittsburgh.
Bill Carpenter, Mayor of Brockton, Massachusetts.
Mike Summers, Mayor of Lakewood, Ohio.
Tito Brown, Mayor of Youngstown, Ohio.
Pat Fury, Mayor of Torrance, California. On January 4th, we had a shooting where 3 people were killed and 4 people were injured.
Good morning. Good morning. Nancy Vaughn, Mayor of Greensboro, North Carolina.
Kim Norton, Mayor of Rochester, Minnesota.
Good morning, Rosalind Bliss, Mayor of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Good morning, Andy Shore, Mayor of Lansing, Michigan.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Catherine Blakespear, and I'm the mayor in the city of Encinitas, which is in San Diego County.
John Hamilton, Bloomington, Indiana.
David Martin, Stamford, Connecticut.
Derek Freeman, Mayor of the great city of Port Arthur, Texas.
Stan Pickett, Mayor of Mesquite, Texas, suburb of Dallas.
Maui County, Hawaii.
Tom Butt, Mayor, Richmond, California.
Good morning, Mayor Buckley, Annapolis, Maryland.
John Dunbar, the Mayor of the town of Yountville in the Napa Valley, California.
Cassie Franklin, Mayor of Everett, Washington.
Catherine Pugh, Mayor of Baltimore City.
Kathy Sheehan, Mayor of Albany, New York.
Hardy Davis, Mayor of Augusta, Georgia.
Wade Kapsakavich, Mayor of Toledo, Ohio.
And of course, you know Mayor Cranley, who earlier introduced himself. We were very blessed in the city of Gary this year to have a reduction in both homicides and gun-related batteries. But what we know is that there is no one strategy. We have used a variety of strategies, from lawsuits to ordinances to the GVI strategy to any number of efforts that are community-based. Mayor Bill Peduto from Pittsburgh will talk to us about some local ordinances that he has championed in the city of Pittsburgh. A little later, at a later session around hate crimes, he's going to talk about the terrible tragedy at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and he may even mention it here today, but please welcome Mayor Peduto.
Thanks, Mayor. Just on the background and just a little bit about myself, I grew up with guns. In my household, there was always at least one .22 and a shotgun. My dad kept a clip in his bedroom drawer and a box of shells. I started out my college career, I'd call it, at Carnegie Mellon, where I was on an Army ROTC scholarship, and I was trained how to properly use a .22 as well as an M16 simulated rifle. My high school was one of those high schools that Monday and Tuesday after Thanksgiving were days off, because that's when hunting season began. And every Thanksgiving, our rifle club would raffle off a 22 rifle that would sit in our cafeteria. So I'm not coming from a background of not understanding guns or being anti-Second Amendment or anything else that happens. But on October 27th, I decided it was a really nice morning to sleep in. It was one of those cold October Pittsburgh days, overcast rain, the ones that just draw you in to hit snooze. And I had a system with my chief of staff that if there were ever an emergency on a day like that, like where you actually have a couple hours off and you're not going to pick up the phone, to hang up and call back twice on this phone. And the bat phone rang, and I ignored it and rolled over, and then it rang a second time, and I knew something was wrong. And both Dan Gilman, my chief of staff, and I live I live 7 blocks from Tree of Life. He lives about 9. And he said, we have an active shooter at Tree of Life. Officers are down, mass casualties expected. And when you get that call, it's a kick to the stomach, and you don't have an immediate reaction. The immediate reaction is, okay. And I said, give me 5 minutes, let me think, and then let's plan on something. And so I put the phone down, I said a short prayer, and I picked the phone right back up, and I said, I need you to pick me up. And he said, I'm already on the way. And thus Pittsburgh became the latest member of the committee that none of us ever want to be on. Mayors from across the country, many of whom are in this room, who've gone through similar tragedies, picked up the phone and called, gave really solid advice, let you know that there's support around you. And our priorities became very, very simple. Take care of the victims and their families, number 1. No matter what decision we make, that's our priority. Number 2, take care of those that have been injured. Number 3, take care of the Jewish community. Number 4, take care of the community at large. And we went through that for 2 weeks. We never mentioned guns or gun violence or mass homicides. We stayed away from the political issues that surrounded it. But we also knew that there was going to come a time in the very near future where we were going to challenge the very laws that allow this to happen on a consistent basis. Last night, there was a 5-hour public hearing back home in Pittsburgh on 3 separate provisions that we have put. We're one of those states where we have a Republican legislature and our cities are dominantly Democratic. And so we have been preempted from having any bills brought up at the local level in order to be able to discuss any issues around guns or ammunition. Secondly, we have also been placed under an order from state law that would allow any citizen to file charges against any elected official who would vote in order to change any laws around guns or ammunition. And we just decided it has to end. If it's not going to happen in Washington and it's not going to happen in Harrisburg, it has to happen in our cities. And I think it's a clarion call to each of us that when women decided that they were going to march and demand the right to vote, they were told it's against the Constitution. You can't vote. The Constitution says you can't vote, but people challenged it. When leaders in the civil rights movement demanded equality, people were told it's in the Constitution. You can't demand equality. And it started at the city level. And that's what we want to do in Pittsburgh, and we want to encourage you to join us. We have put 3 common sense reforms in, reforms that allow anyone to practice their right to have a gun, the right to be able to follow the Second Amendment, but lessen the impacts that happen every month in this country now through mass homicide. One of them preempts the use and the basic ownership right of anybody that has an assault type weapon. That's the controversial one. That's the one that becomes the litmus test and the one that gets debated quite a bit. It doesn't confiscate previously owned, legally purchased assault-type rifles like an AR-15. But what it does do is stop the use and allowing people to have them within the city's borders. The second one has already been dealt with by AFT, or I'm sorry, TFA? ATF. I'm from Pittsburgh. AFT comes first, so ATF. And that's the use of bump stocks, which create machine guns, which machine guns are already illegal, and it's just a way to get around. It's a loophole, and the Trump administration has already banned them. But it also bans the use and purchase and owning of bullets that can penetrate armor. And the third one is pretty simple, and what we think most people would agree, that we realize that there are people who shouldn't have guns, that are in a mental state either temporarily or chronically, that are going to cause harm to themselves or to others. And a police officer or a family member should have the ability to go to the court and to be able to go through due process and have their weapons temporarily relieved from them, just like we do with protection from abuse orders or domestic violence orders, and to be able to allow during that time the person to get the help they need. Those are the three areas where we think that this discussion needs to begin. And we have, as many people have reminded us, no legal right to do it. That the state of Pennsylvania has made it so that local government can't do it. But we intend to not only go ahead and to pass this, and to pass it by February 14th on the anniversary of Parkland, and to remember those that lost their lives there by making sure it passes on that date, but also then to go to court and to fight this in court and to fight it over and over again. And my hope would be that cities throughout this country would do the same thing. And we'll be in court all over this country until Congress hears the clarion call, until our state capitals hear the clarion call, that there are ways that we can lessen the amount of people who are dying, and there are ways to do this beyond there's nothing that can be done.
Thank you very much, Mayor Perdue. That was awesome. To your restraining order bill, a couple days ago when we met with the Coalition to End Gun Violence, they were explaining to us that there are 10 states, including 5 Republican states and Republican governors, who have signed legislation on the statewide level that allows you to go, get a restraining order from someone to be able to purchase guns. If family or others go on an ex parte basis to get a temporary restraining order for 15 days and then a full hearing for a year ban or longer. That is another topic we hope to discuss in Toledo. And so now we're going to do all of our initial speakers and then come around for discussion. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that we get copies of the legislation.
Yeah. The request was that Bill share the legislation with all of us. Yep. Great. Now I'd like to introduce my good friend and fellow Ohioan, the Mayor of Toledo, Wade Kapsakavich.
Thank you, Mayor Cranley. In a lot of ways, I don't even know where to begin. I have so much passion and emotion on this issue. Toledo, Ohio is one of those cities that fortunately has not gone through what Pittsburgh has and so many other cities in this country has. But I realize that it could happen any day, could happen any time, could happen in any one of our cities. And I'm just tired. I'm tired of it. I'm exhausted of it. We are, I believe, the greatest country in the world. We put a man on the moon. We helped win World War II. We eradicate diseases, and we've done so many wonderful things as a country. And yet we are the only country on planet Earth where this happens with any regularity. We're the only country that hasn't figured out a way to make a difference on this. The only one. I hope that the mayor is successful in his legislative efforts in Pittsburgh, and I suspect he will be. I hope that's the case. I hope that other legislative efforts that your cities or states may be undertaking will be successful. I don't know if they will be, though, simply because of some of the forces that Mayor Peduto talked about, the relentless drama that always takes place around this debate, with extreme views on both sides. But it has just proven to be so difficult to pass any sort of common sense legislation on this issue. Even when 92%, I forget what the percentages were, after Sandy Hook happened, the Senate was debating some measures that 92% of the American people supported, and they still couldn't pass it. It's just not going to happen right now in Washington, D.C. And it wasn't going to happen before this shutdown, but there is a certain metaphor, in my judgment, for being in this city right now at this time, where the fact that they can't do anything, they can't cooperate, they can't get along, it's not going to happen. If we sit around and wait for Washington, it's not going to happen. In my more cynical moments, I worry that they just don't care. I mean, if you don't take action that 92% of the American people support when 26-year-olds are being killed while they're crying under their desks, you probably are just not going to solve this problem. So I began to reflect on what can we do. And I've been a part of this debate for about 20 years. When I was first elected to Toledo City Council 20 years ago, about a month later, Columbine happened. That's 20 years ago. You talk about the anniversary of Parkland coming up. Well, the anniversary of Columbine is coming up, 20 years ago, roughly. And we passed a number of ordinances, and as Mayor Cranley highlighted, they were almost immediately preempted and thrown out and flushed down the toilet by the state legislature. I have begun to think about ways that cities can make a difference without having to worry about whether Congress is ever going to get its act together or whether your individual state legislature may ever get its act together. And it struck me 20 years ago when we had a city council chamber jammed with passionate people on all sides of the issue, that among the things that is always said by those who want to protect the status quo, one of the things they say is, come on, we already have enough laws on the books. We got so many laws on the books, we don't need any more. Why don't you just enforce the laws you have? I began to think, all right, fine. Maybe there's a way we can do this without the silliness and the circus of those packed city council chambers and debates. Toledo may be structured differently than your cities. If you have we're a strong mayor form of government. I don't know in your city if you have a city manager or a different structure. This might not be the case in your city. But I can tell you in Toledo, city council, just like any legislative body, appropriates money for stuff, but then it is the executive who decides how to spend that money. When we go out to bid later this spring for our ammunition for our police department, our guns and our replacement parts for guns, we're going to include a list of questions that will help us ascertain which companies are responsible and which aren't. Toledo spends about $200,000 on this effort, and I'm sure the gun companies wouldn't miss our $200,000 at all. But if just the cities in Ohio, and I see we got 3 mayors over there sitting in Ohio, Ohio mayors, and of course we've talked to Mayor Ginther and others. If just the big cities in Ohio joined Toledo in our attempt to put purchasing power pressure on the gun companies, all of a sudden Toledo's little $200,000 turns into, I think, $1.3 million. And then if we begin to get support from other cities around the country, whether it is Houston or Los Angeles or New York or any one of the, all of a sudden we are now talking about tens of millions of dollars. I don't think it would be hundreds of millions of dollars, but it would be tens of millions of dollars. And while they wouldn't miss Toledo's $200,000, they might miss the tens of millions of dollars of business that they would lose if the cities of this conference and the cities of this country banded together in an attempt to put free market pressure on these companies to do what we think is responsible. So, you don't want any more laws? You think we got enough laws? Good, because this ain't another law. This is using the executive power of the mayor's office to award contracts in a way that we think is responsible. It is this some socialist plot? I'm anticipating argument. Socialist plot to burn the Constitution? Nope. This doesn't involve any laws at all. And in fact, this uses the free market capitalist system that I'm told is a wonderful thing. So, if you don't like our approach, you must not like America. You must not like capitalism. Because what we're going to try to do is put free market pressure on these companies to behave better and to respond better, much like several airlines and banks did in the wake of Parkland. So this is not a new idea. I mean, I came to it on my own, but subsequent research has helped me learn that there are other mayors in the last 5-10 years, other cities that have pondered something like this. Those efforts didn't necessarily get off the ground, and I'm probably already over my time, so I might say, I think if those efforts failed, they may have failed for lack of buy-in among more cities. And so my hope is that going forward, in a conversation that could continue in April 11th, when Mayor Cranley hosts a Conference of Mayors meeting in Toledo that I hope you all attend, if we can get more buy-in from more cities with the help of this conference, I do think we can start to put together tens of millions of dollars of free market pressure on these companies to help them be responsible. We don't need an ordinance. We don't need a law. We don't have to worry about being preempted. We have this power as mayors, and we can wield it, and I hope we do. I apologize for taking too much time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So between now and April 10th and 11th, we would have dinner in Toledo on April 10th, if you can make it, and have one day of sessions on Thursday, April 11th. That's it, one day, but have more than an hour to get into all these issues in more detail. Two important points. The goal for a meeting like this, which is not part of the annual conference meeting, is that you all bring your chiefs with you. Having law enforcement with us is very powerful, and one of the great things about this task force is when we can stand united with our chiefs and the executive leadership of police departments around the country. And frankly, they're probably going to give us some very helpful and constructive feedback as we develop this. And between now and then, we would like to send out draft ideas on how a scorecard could be put together and to get feedback both by you and by your chiefs before showing up in Toledo in April, so we can have a constructive and productive conversation. It won't be the only thing we talk about. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the restraining orders. Every town, the coalition, Brady, are all going to be there, and we'll hit a number of topics throughout the day. But I thought this consumer power idea was so exciting that we should make sure we really put some time into that. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to Chief Ramsey. As you may know, Chief Ramsey came up in the Chicago Police Department and served as the police chief of both Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, and chaired for President Obama the Task Force on 21st Century Policing. Chief Ramsey.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for putting this this meeting together and for being a part of that meeting that's coming up in Toledo. I think it's going to be very important for us to spend time talking about this very important issue. As Mayor Cranley mentioned, I've been in policing a long time. I actually began my police career in 1968. In the Chicago Police Department. So I've seen a lot over the years. And part of what I've seen is an increase in gun violence. This is nothing new to many of you sitting around the table because you experience it yourselves. But I'm going to use Philadelphia as an example. That's the most recent city I served in, and I still live in Philadelphia. Last year, Philadelphia had 351 homicides. 80% of those homicides were committed with a firearm. Now, that's not unusual for Philadelphia. It's 75 to 80% every single year of the homicides that are committed are handguns involved. I have been to hundreds, maybe thousands of crime scenes over my years of service. I can't remember the last time I went to a homicide scene or a shooting scene where I only saw one shell casing on the ground. People are not only being shot once, they're being shot multiple times. It is so bad that in Philadelphia, police officers no longer wait for an ambulance to respond to the scene. Our officers put the victim in the back seat of the car and take them directly to the trauma center because people are literally bleeding out on the street waiting for the ambulance. It's not a knock against the fire department, it's just reality. People hit 4 or 5 times with high caliber weapons. Believe me, they bleed out very quickly. We do not wait. We're blessed in Philly to have great trauma centers. If we can get them there with an ounce of blood and a heartbeat, they maybe can save them. And that's the attitude we have. That's how bad it really is. Wow. Also, when you think about what's going on in our country, certainly the mass shootings get our attention, whether it's Newtown, Parkland, Las Vegas, Pittsburgh. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But there are mass shootings and mass murder that takes place in our country every single day, 1 at a time, 2 at a time. These are the homicides that are taking place in Chicago, in Pittsburgh, in Baltimore, Philadelphia. Every single day, people are losing their lives. And we're just talking about homicides now. We're not even talking about suicides because there's a gun in the house. We're not talking about the accidental shootings that take place where one sibling finds a gun in the house and shoots a brother or a sister accidentally. We aren't talking about the trauma that young people that live in many of our neighborhoods experience when they have to walk past crime scenes every single day on the way to school, and we wonder why these kids have trouble learning. They're traumatized. You would be too if you had to see this stuff every single day. We have a homicide that takes place in Philadelphia after the crime lab leaves the scene, the processing's finished. We call the fire department out to hose down the sidewalk. Get that blood off the street. Some kid shouldn't have to walk past that the next day. Take the crime scene tape all the way down, not just break it in half, because people don't need to be reminded. Young people don't need to be reminded of that. Why do we have to go through this? Why do we have to go through this? And just to show you how insensitive we've come to crime and violence, a couple days ago, there was a mass shooting in Sebring, Florida. 5 people murdered in a bank, SunTrust Bank. How much of that did you see on television? Spent the whole day talking about the shutdown and talking about, you know, all the nonsense going on here in Washington, D.C. 5 people slaughtered, and that's no longer the top news story. Change has got to happen, folks, but it's only going to happen in cities. It's going to happen at the grassroots level. It happens in the people who have to experience it and deal with it every single day. And we're talking about the murders. 116,000 people were shot in the United States last year. 116,000 people. What about the medical costs? What about the cost associated with that? And many of the people, unfortunately, getting shot aren't people that have Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Who pays that? This has an enormous impact on all of us, The people who have to deal with it, the families of the victims, the people who live in the neighborhoods where this is taking place, young people like Mr. Hogg that you're going to hear from soon, whose life will never be the same because of what he experienced and what others experienced down in Parkland, Florida. I mean, when is enough enough? And it's only going to be enough when we stand up and do something about it. Otherwise, we need to stop having these meetings because they don't mean a damn thing. All we do is talk about it, and we do nothing in terms of action. There's power here. There's power from the grassroots that can change what's going on in this country. This is our country, all of our country, not just Smith & Wesson, Colt, Glock, and all the folks that make guns. It's not the NRA's country. This is our country. And we want it to be safe. We want it to be secure for everybody. And unless we do something, that simply is not going to happen, because I guarantee you there's another homicide that's going to take place, if not at this very moment, within the next few minutes, and there's certainly another mass shooting right around the corner, and you don't know when and where because of our inaction as a society. So I just hope that this leads to something concrete that we can work on and that we can build on. And I think my time is up. So thank you.
You know, we have mayors running for president. Why not a former police chief?
Now we know why Chief Ramsey is called America's chief. Thank you, Chief Ramsey. We'll now hear from a young man whom Chief Ramsey just referred to, and who Mayor Cranley mentioned earlier has turned a tragic situation and his experience in that tragedy into a cause to make our country better. Chief Ramsey just gave us a challenge to do something. This young man is doing something every day, and we are so proud of the work that he is doing. Please now hear David Hogg from the March for Our Lives. David.
Thank you. First off, I want to start off by saying, some of you might be thinking like, ooh, this is too political of an issue for me to be involved in. This is a third rail that I can't take. Taking the third rail when 40,000 Americans are dying annually and children are dying inside and outside of schools on their way to schools every day is not an option. I don't need your help. Our generation needs your help to end gun violence, because this issue has continued on for way too long. We need every mayor's support. I don't care if you have a D or an R next to your name. The only thing that matters is whether or not you're a human being with actual empathy, whether or not you're going to stand up and take action before this issue becomes political in your city, because so many people have died from it. And I also want us to recognize that even though the media may only like to pay attention to mass shootings, every shooting has to be just as important to you. I know that almost every mayor in this room gets a text on your phone when somebody gets shot and killed in your city. And you may be thinking to yourself when you read that, oh, I don't need to worry about that because I was only one person killed. I don't need to worry about that because that occurred in the part of town where people don't like to talk about that's not politically powerful. Ending gun violence does not look like just ending mass shootings. Ending gun violence does not look like just ending gun violence in one zip code. Ending gun violence does not look like ending just gun violence for one person because of the color of their skin. Ending gun violence looks like ending gun violence in every community, no matter who is affected, because in America, we care about you because you are one thing, and that is human being. We need your support. If you are afraid of the NRA, then you shouldn't even be here. If you're afraid of the ramifications that is going to come from radical change to save lives, then you should not be here right now, because that's the change that we need. In fact, if you're afraid of going out and saving lives and standing up to an organization that is not only funded by gun manufacturers that benefit off of the perpetrating of violence and incrimination within our youth, if you're afraid of them, and the same organization that is actively under investigation by the Department of Justice for Russian interference in our election, who had a Russian spy, mind you, Maria Butina, plead guilty to conspiring with the Republican Party and the NRA to try to destroy our own country. If you're afraid of them, why the hell are you here right now? Seriously. We need more mayors like Peduto. We need every one of you standing up, because I guarantee you they can go after one of us, they can go after a few of us, but they cannot go after every single mayor within the United States. Because I don't care where you come from or who you are. The fact that you are in this room right now should mean that you care about ending gun violence. And sometimes that means taking a step out where you may not get reelected, but you'll go down fighting. And that's what creates change in this country. I want us to recognize that over-incarcerating our youth and throwing people into prison is not what's going to end violence. Over-policing our youth is not what's going to end violence, and in fact, in many communities, it's what perpetrates it. Because it does not foster a proper relationship between future generations and our youth. Programs that work are programs like violence intervention programs, like the New York City Crisis Management System that I encourage each and every one of you to look up. It's run by an amazing woman who nobody talks about because she works in preventing gun violence in the black and brown community that the media doesn't like to pay attention to. That I just spent 3 days interning at in New York City and Jamaica, Queens. Her name is Erica Ford. Write this down: Crisis Management System, Gun Violence Intervention System. These are the systems that work. Violence intervention programs that cost a couple $1 million a year. I don't even care if you don't care about lives, because I know you care about one thing, and that's money. Violence intervention programs save billions of dollars down the line, because by investing a couple $1 million in our community up front, by hiring people that are formerly out of the criminal justice system, that know what the at-risk youth are going through from that community, and use them to talk to those youth and stop them from going down the same path, they are able to reduce gun violence within their first year of implementation in the communities they are implemented in, on average, by 40 to 70%, while not increasing the mass incarceration epidemic that we have in this country. Secondly, we need to stop talking about this as a political issue. This is a public health issue. Violence is a public health issue no matter the weapon that's used. Because even if we stop these criminals from being able to get guns and perpetrating these crimes with them, there's still going to be people that go out there, and that violence is still going to be there in the first place. And it may not be as lethal, but it's still just as traumatizing, right? So what we need to do is we need to treat violence like a disease through programs like Ceasefire and the New York City Crisis Management System that use community organizers and young people from that community, like Rashawn, who I worked with over the past 3 days. That's a 21-year-old, and I worked with in the New York City public school system, interrupting small fights that were occurring in middle schools. By working with our communities from the ground up and starting now, 20 years from now, hopefully we don't need to keep having this meeting. Because if we're meeting 20 years from now, if we're meeting 10 years from now, we have failed. And there's a lot more work that we need to do. If you actually want to take a stance on this issue, if you actually care about people dying and you don't just want to send your thoughts and prayers, and you want to stop youth and everyone from dying in your community from preventable gun violence, no matter the zip code it occurs in, no matter the number of figures in their bank account, no matter what they look like, or any other predefining characteristic, if you care about them, then you will stand, and you will take a stance against the NRA, and you will fight them in court. You will establish extreme risk protection orders that are one of the best things at stopping gun violence, and specifically mass shootings, that disarm people like domestic abusers, terrorists, and people that are about to kill themselves through due process. Because when people say you're trying to take my guns away because of extreme risk protection orders, I ask them 3 questions. When I've been faced with armed protesters in Dallas, Texas, that were shouting our names from March for Our Lives, that wanted to shoot us, and we went out and talked to them. When they said, why are you trying to take your guns away? We asked 3 questions. The first was, are you trying to kill yourself? No. The second was, are you a terrorist? No. And the third was, are you going to go out and commit a mass atrocity or go out and kill someone? And they said no. And I said, I'm not trying to take your guns. Because the truth of the matter is, any law-abiding gun owner should not be afraid of extreme risk protection orders if they knew what they are. The truth of the matter is, if we cared about whether or not we want to end gun violence, we would all stand up and we would fight them, the NRA, and the gun manufacturers that are funding the NRA, along with Russia. I'm not kidding. That's not a laughing matter. They're actually interfering in our election through. That's how deep-rooted the NRA is in our own political pocket, in a public health issue. And even though you may think arming more people may work, if you think guns make us safer, I got news for you. America would be the safest country on the damn planet. because we have more guns than people in this country. And there's a reason why every other more developed country has significantly less gun violence and gun deaths than we do. One of the other things that you guys can implement within your city is a mandatory waiting period. If you're lucky enough to be in one of the states that doesn't block gun regulations at the state level, which is bullshit, by the way. Waiting periods, on average, are able to save lives, specifically from suicide, which is the vast majority of gun deaths in America. In states they've been implemented in, they're able to reduce suicides by 10 to 15% within the first year. That's not just a percentage, mind you. That is thousands of people, and that is thousands of people that get to survive. Because gun suicides are successful 95% of the time. Typically, other suicide attempts, like overdosing, is successful only 2% of the time. And a vast majority of the people that survive their first suicide attempt do not attempt again because they realize that they need that help, but they do not get that second chance with a gun. And even if you think that you're a small rural mayor in primarily white America, and you think this issue doesn't affect you, I guarantee you there is a massive problem, an epidemic that nobody talks about with gun suicide, specifically that affects middle-class, primarily white males in rural America that nobody talks about. And we need to start having those conversations at a municipal level and at a local level to create this change at the federal level. So I don't care if you're afraid of the NRA. I don't care if you're afraid to lose your election. Because if you're afraid that you're going to lose your election, but you're not afraid that thousands of people are going to continue to die from gun violence in your city, what the hell are you doing in your position? Thank you.
Thank you, David. And
as one last thing, make sure you guys look up crisis violence intervention programs. They seriously save billions of taxpaying dollars down the line and thousands of lives in the process, and don't over-incarcerate our youth, which is a massive problem that we have in a country that we claim to be free in. Thank you.
How many of you are employing the group violence intervention strategy in your cities? David is absolutely right. It's something that is extremely, not just cost-effective, but life-saving. How many of you are, have the 10-Point Coalition in your cities? And Ceasefire, which is also a form of group violence intervention. Okay. Many of those strategies are a result of the support that we get and the partnership that we have from the COPS office. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge COPS Director Phil Keith, who is here. There he is.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And our new motto in the COPS office is listen to what mayors and police chiefs have to say, and we're trying to do the best we can with that today. Hopefully we're going to be open for government, open for work. Oh, sorry. We're going to be open at least until February the 11th, and our goal now is to make sure the grant payment system operates flawlessly to the degree we can make it operate that way, and none of your grants will be adversely affected. But it's always a pleasure to be with the mayors. We feel like you're friends of the COPS office and certainly support our efforts to promote community engagement and just fundamentally doing the right thing in law enforcement. So it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. I also see that we have been joined by our fearless leader, and he has shown tremendous leadership in Columbia, South Carolina on this issue. Please welcome to the microphone our President, Steve Benjamin, Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, to talk about his work.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm excited about being here. I love listening to David speak because obviously we have probably, I don't know, 3 dozen people around the table, at least 4 dozen opinions around the table on any number of topics. So many of us will agree with several things he has to say and disagree maybe with some of the others. But I love the youth activism that we're seeing. it's so important to realize that activism without action is just a conversation. We're just having another conversation about something that requires real action, and seeing the intestinal fortitude that he's showing and helping to inspire young people all around the country to help us make sure that the dream and promise of America stays real for each and every one of our babies is exciting. So I'm thankful for him. I'm going to be incredibly brief. I want to thank Karen and John Cranley and others who've been doing great work working along with our chiefs of police and so many other mayors around this table, and helping make sure that the U.S. Conference of Mayors continues to do what it has done for years, be in the forefront and the vanguard of policy making to help us attack existing challenges, some that have been long-term challenges, but also emerging challenges facing the American population. We've taken our role in Colombia in this space very seriously. We are in the heart of the American South. We are a place where gun rights are not only important, but I dare say sacrosanct to our way of life in the South. So the importance of thoughtful policy making that can be used maybe as even as armor for colleagues in other places of the country where these conversations aren't even happening is so important to us. That's why we passed the bump stock ban in Columbia, South Carolina, because we knew that on a council with 7 members, 6 of us gun owners, several of us owning several guns, we knew that type of thoughtful policy making in a place like Columbia would allow our friends in similar cities all around the country to begin to do some thoughtful policy making and saying, yes, in the heart of the Deep South, this type of action is going on. We were not hesitant. Just a few years ago, after the tragedy of the Emanuel 9 shootings, some of our state policymakers, I'm sure someone was just happened to be asleep at the switch that day. They were discussing taking down the Confederate battle flag, which eventually happened. But in the midst of that discussion, there were 2 permits applied for to protest on the same day. One from the Ku Klux Klan of Western North Carolina, and the other from the New Black Panther Party of North Florida. Permits awarded, rally awarded, same day, same time, same place, at our state capitol, literally 4 or 5 blocks away from City Hall. And we decided that we needed to act. We understood that we were preempted from doing certain things under our state law. Of course, our Deputy Chief of Police, Marwan Kelly, is here right now. But we still knew that we also had an oath that we had taken to protect the health, life, and safety of our citizens. So we decided to act, and we immediately passed an ordinance that banned firearms within the perimeter of our state capitol building. We knew, and I know we're probably on camera, but that's all right. We knew that we were in direct violation of our state's preemption laws, but we also knew that we were directly consistent on constitutional grounds to do what we did. We were sued. We lost the lawsuit on preemption grounds. We were ruled constitutional on what we did. And I will tell you that $3,000 fine is the best money we ever spent in our lives. I'm convinced that thoughtful, proactive policy making saved lives and provided some type of a platform for us to continue to do things in the future that would indeed save lives. Thank you to each and every one of you. I don't know what happens here in Washington on every single day, and our state capitals are also infected sometimes with this paralysis of not wanting to do thoughtful, pragmatic policy making that saves lives. But in each and every one of your cities, you're doing some incredibly creative things. Share those ideas, share those practices. Let's get some of these best ideas and take them all around the country, and we'll do what mayors always do. We get the job done. We get the job done, and we'll continue to do so under the leadership of USCM, Mayors Freeman Wilson, Mayor Cranley. Thank you, and thank all of our presenters for the work. Thank you to the COPS office for your continued partnership. We look forward to continuing to develop this relationship into something that's meaningful and meaningful to the people of the United States. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our final speaker is going to discuss the glimmer of hope in Congress that Mayor Cranley talked about earlier. Sarah Trumbull is the Director of Federal Legislative Campaigns at Everytown for Gun Safety, the parent organization for Mayors Against Illegal Guns. Many of us have been longtime members or are new members of Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and we appreciate the partnership that we enjoy with that organization. Sarah is going to describe the universal background check bill that's been introduced in both houses and its prospects, and I hope that she will give us some guidance on members that we might target and states where we need to have some action in terms of reaching out to our members. I suspect Indiana is one of them. Sarah, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be on this esteemed panel and to speak with all of you. My name is Sarah Trumbull. I'm here today on behalf of Everytown for Gun Safety, which is the nation's largest gun violence prevention organization, our grassroots arm, Moms Demand Action, and Mayors Against Illegal Guns, which is our bipartisan coalition of more than 1,000 current and former mayors across the country. And I am going to tell you all about what's happening on the federal level. Despite how bleak it seems, it is not quite that bleak. But I first would be remiss if I did not say that while we know the politics of guns is certainly a national issue, that the consequences of gun violence is a local issue. We know that this is something that you all are experiencing in your communities every day, and we are so grateful for all the work that you are doing. We are so excited to have the opportunity to work with you. If you would like to be more involved with Mayors Against Illegal Guns, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our team is here. Paul, the orange tie, can't miss it. Sharon, Michael, they're all here. But federally speaking, we are extremely pleased that thanks to the work of David and young activists and people across the country, in November we elected a gun sense majority to the House of Representatives for the first time. And less than a week into that Congress, they introduced H.R. 8, a bipartisan background checks bill that would require background checks on all gun sales. Under current federal law, background checks are only required by licensed dealers. That means that there is a gaping huge loophole where people are able to simply seek out an unlicensed seller and avoid a background check. In the 25 years since that law was first passed, the internet has emerged as a massive, unregulated marketplace where hundreds of thousands of sales take place with no questions asked. It's time to update the laws to meet the times, and that means requiring background checks in all the places guns are sold today, not just in brick and mortar stores, but online and at gun shows too. This is an issue that we know can sometimes seem complicated, but it actually is not. Background checks work, they save lives. In the 25 years that the system has been working for licensed dealers, more than 3.5 million illegal gun sales have been stopped. In 2017, 39% of those were to convicted felons who were trying to buy guns. If we can close the loopholes that still exist, we can make massive changes. States that already require background checks on all handgun sales are associated with 48% lower rates of gun trafficking in their cities. That could happen across the country. This is not a right or left issue, it is a life and death issue. And it is something that all of our federal representatives really need to hear from you on. Your voices are so important and so incredibly powerful. I just hired a gentleman who came from the Senate. He'd worked there for years, and I told him I was coming here today, and he said, my boss had a rule. If a local mayor or a local elected official called, we dropped everything. We canceled every meeting. She met with them immediately. That is probably true in every single office. This is not going to be an easy push. We feel pretty optimistic about the House of Representatives. H.R. 8 already has 226 co-sponsors. You only need 218 votes to pass legislation, so that seems pretty promising. And we think they're going to move it quite quickly. We expect to see a vote before the first 100 days are up. But the Senate is not going to be a cakewalk. But it's also not impossible. Members of Congress and senators really need to hear from folks on the ground that this issue is important to them, that it is a bipartisan issue, and there are states across the country where there are moderate Republicans and Republicans in the Senate who are going to need to know that their communities stand with them. So in places like Colorado and Indiana and Florida and North Carolina and Ohio, all of your senators really, really need to be hearing from you, and we are more than happy to help you talk about the bill, talk about background checks, talk about how it could affect your state. So if you have any questions, please feel free to talk to us. You can go to everytown.org/background checks for all of our information on the legislation, or just come find me or Paul afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks again to you and Paul and your entire team for your leadership and all of the work that you do. We have no time, but I am going to take the chair's prerogative. Laura may get me later, but Mayor Pugh.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the panel. One of the discussions that I did not hear, but I thank you, Chuck, for bringing it up, is that, you know, the guns that we're talking about on the streets of urban cities across this nation, background checks won't help. Because these are guns that are coming in from everywhere. We don't even know how they're getting into our states. We got state troopers, we got the FBI, we got the DEA, we have ATF, everybody. But yet, we have more illegal guns on the streets of our city probably now today than ever before. You know, there's no conversation about how do you mediate this. There's no, I mean, mental health services, and I can tell you we've done everything, Chuck, from 1 day's work to 1 day's pay just to keep people off the corners. We have mobile units going out to the streets, getting people jobs. But illegal guns are on the streets of our city, and we attempted to pass a law to make it illegal to carry an illegal gun. ACLU, folks will argue, black on black, you know, the mass incarceration of African-American males. But yet the reality is that people are getting shot every single day. I'm sure as I've been here this weekend, there have been 3 or 4 murders in my city. And so I don't hear those discussions. And while we've not suffered mass incarceration, we feel like we've been mass shootings. We feel there's mass shootings every day because somebody is dying in our city. And it's not by the lack of a background check. It's the influx of illegal guns that end up in the hands of not just men on our street, young children on our street. So I would love to hear someone address that. You know, again, we've attempted legislation. We couldn't get the council to pass it. And, you know, this whole conversation around what are we, you know, being afraid. We're not afraid. You know, we want solutions. So I just would love to hear some feedback.
I guess I might say that I'm not sure with whom the city of Baltimore does business when it comes to its police department, but I would welcome Baltimore to join other cities in this country in developing standards to ascertain that the money we are giving these companies don't go to organizations that look the other way as AR-15s end up in the hands of mentally ill 17-year-olds. So what do we do about illegal? It's a huge problem. But I think we can bring change to these companies that right now don't care what happens to their guns.
I understand where you're coming from, but that's, you know, we'll join every organization. We don't mind doing that. I'm talking about something that's happening every single day with illegal guns, and you know, and we can take all of the money out of the gun shops and organizations that are selling them, but they're not going to gun shops to get guns.
They're getting them on the street.
What I'm saying is your city could stop giving money to those companies that are bad actors.
I'm saying that's not the problem.
Chief Ramsey.
Yeah, you raise a good point there, Mayor. A lot of the guns are illegal. They're not being purchased legally. Of course, you have the issue of straw purchasing that has to be addressed because that's one way in which they get there. But we had a situation that one of the street gangs, they were actually renting guns. That's not uncommon. You want a gun to do a hit, you can, for $50, $25, you get a gun, use it, bring it back, and that's it. The guns are stashed in an abandoned house or something like that, so you don't have constructive possession on anybody if you do catch them with it. So it's a serious problem. I don't have an exact solution for it. I mean, obviously, I think that we got to deal not only with guns, but we got to deal with the people who are in possession of illegal guns and use guns to commit crime. And I know there's a push on the part of many, and talking about incarceration and this, that, and the other. Some of these folks belong in jail. That's where they need to be, and they need to be in there a long time because they need to, you got to prove a point, and that is that's just not acceptable.
Right, consequences for your actions.
And there are consequences for it, period. But right now, we're kind of all over the place. No one is afraid to carry a gun, legal or illegal. They're just not afraid.
And so I guess my question is, how do you create that sentiment around the need to deal with this exact problem?
Well, it's the same way we're trying to reach the manufacturers and others on a much larger scale. I mean, I just think the city, and I'm not talking about Baltimore, I'm talking about all these cities that have this kind of issue. We have to just take a strong stand and and be harsh. And I hate to say that, but it's true. You get caught with an illegal gun, you use a gun to commit a crime. I'm not trying to ban all guns. I'm not anti-gun, but I do have a serious issue with people who use guns to commit crime. And when you get caught with the gun, I mean, listen, if it was me, I'd give you 10 years for having a gun, and now we'll talk about the robbery later on and see how much time I'm going to give you for that. But I would give you, I would hit them hard just for having the gun and then add on top of that whatever crime. But that gets lost, and you got to get prosecutors in here because they plea away a lot of these things. You get people with illegal guns through plea bargaining, they drop that charge and they give them something else, and next thing you know, you're locking up the same people over and over and over again. And they go in and commit these crimes, and they got rap sheets a mile long.
So on that point, you may do this already, but what we do, so if you are if you have a conviction, a previous felony, the mere possession of a gun is a federal offense. It's unbelievably powerful law, and unfortunately, across the country, most U.S. attorneys don't want to deal with it. They want big terrorism cases. They don't deal with everyday shootings. We luckily have a cooperative U.S. attorney, although we'd like to bring more cases. We actually pay out of our city budget for 2 lawyers to work full-time with the U.S. attorney to bring more of these cases. There's 2 issues. One is, can you get the U.S. attorney to agree to bring a case, which is one political issue. The second issue is a real resource issue. And so we said, we'll take the resource issue off the table by we'll pay for the lawyers in your office to bring more of these cases, and we've seen that's had a huge impact.
I think you raise an important thing through this discussion, and that's the need to have U.S. attorneys and district prosecutors at the table, and perhaps on the 10th and the 11th, you can get some of your prosecutors to come. It's close enough that certainly out of Toledo, that might be a great conversation, as well as the U.S. attorney. Is that the Northern District, or do they divide it in East or West?
It's the Northern District.
Northern District of Ohio.
From Detroit, too.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I see a hand.
Mayor Buckley from the City of Annapolis. First of all, I'll be quick. I want to thank you for your leadership. Thank you for this organization for bringing back our social conscience in the country. And I think that's sort of what has happened to Annapolis. Everybody knows. We just experienced the same thing just a little bit after Pittsburgh. But we have organized 2 initiatives. We are doing, on the 1-year anniversary of the shooting, we're doing a thing called the G77 Summit. It's 77 cities. We're going to be reaching out to them soon that have been affected by mass shootings just in this century. So that doesn't include Columbine. So 77 cities have had mass shootings in. And the second thing we're doing is we are doing an annual report as a database on what type of shootings happen in our city, whether it's a close-range shooting, whether it involves drugs, mental health, whether a person died before they got to the hospital. So we can shape this sort of thing, and we know exactly what we're dealing with. And the third thing I wanted to say, I'm shame that David is not here. Before our mass shooting happened, I got to speak at the Kids March for Our Lives, our version in Annapolis, and I was one of the only adults to speak there. And just before that event, I was with a group of 100 African-American business women leaders at the local community college, and I said, I've got to go to this hearing now and speak. I wish you could stick around, but I've got to go. I said, but I know if there were more women elected officials, we'd have some gun control, and I don't think it's a Second Amendment issue. I think it's a small penis issue. And, and all the 100 women went, did he just say that? And the truth is, it's bullying, and we have to stand up to bullies. We teach our kids to stand up to bullies, and I think all of the mayors in this room understand that. Thank you.
Well, we are seriously out of time. But we will try to extend it, right? The April 10th and 11th, Toledo, and remember, we want you to bring your chiefs, and the U.S. Attorney's a good idea too, but bring your chiefs so we can have a coalition of the elected officials and the police chiefs. Having law enforcement on our side is extremely powerful politically, and because they're going to give us very constructive feedback of what we can and can't do and what are the pros and the cons. So I hope to see you all April 10th and 11th. Mayor Karen, anything else?
Only thank you, and thanks for your comments and your work, the work that you do in your communities.
Thank you very much.
Hi, how are you? What happened? Still here. Actually, COB February 12th. So, like, that's when we would issue the Hi, Sheena Long. New Palmas. Okay. Oh, I've got an email I need to email them. Okay. Our director is meeting here. February 11th. She's in the room. It's noble. So like yeah, he's full of occupancy. Yeah. You see, they closed down. They don't have enough, like, for air safety concerns. They closed the airport. They halted all flights. Me too. I've been saying that. I've been saying that. I know. No, I know. No, we've both been saying that. Like, it's going to take a major catalyst.
For an outbreak, because the inspection is being done and somebody's
I know doing nothing. Oh, they called themselves. Perfect.
Yeah, you're right. There are details that
Right? It's a little preachy. You don't have to have Caesar and like, you don't have to just because you're 18. Yeah, that's what he doesn't realize.